You're listening to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, aimed at helping photographers learn how to make the leap from amateur to pro. Hello, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Business podcast, a joint effort brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University. This is Shamir Young, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Skip Cohen. Skip.
Wow. I've waited, 4 years to make it to amazing co-host.
I think I've said it before, but you deserve it. You deserve it multiple times.
Thank you. I think what's amazing right now is the way we all feel in terms of starting to get back to the definition of normal again. Yes. And it's a new normal, which we're going to talk about today. But what a great feeling to be able to be out a little bit and have conferences and shows and actually meet friends for lunch and dinner and whatever now and then.
Oh my goodness, it's such a wonderful feeling and the perfect
an amazing time.
Topic of discussion for today.
Yeah, and we've got a great show today. We've got David Trust in the Mind Your Own Business house, and David is the CEO of PPA. He and I have known each other for a whole lot of years, going back to around 98 when he joined PPA as their director of marketing. Now, David's been instrumental in supporting photographers in just about every aspect of their business, including copyright, for example. And you know what? If you spend a little time with him, you really start to understand why the organization just keeps growing, why the show keeps getting better, why the benefits for photographers keep improving, and there's so much going on there. But David, Shamir, and I today, we're really not going to talk much about PPA directly, but what photographers need to do to get back on track and start rebuilding business that was lost during all the challenges of the last year. Now, along the way, I know that David's background in marketing and business is going to come shining through. So, David, here it is. Here's the cue for your lips to move. Welcome to Mind Your Own Business.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure being with you. I've been a fan here. I've been listening to your podcasts, and I just think you're doing an amazing job and great information. I'm excited to be on it today.
Well, thank you. I have to find a new line, but it's really pathetic when every time I say this is the cue for your lips to move, I laugh because it does make it hits me as funny. So I don't know. Somewhere down the line, I'll come up with a new line for a cue for our guests.
It's perfect.
It is perfect. Just leave it just the way it is.
Oh, well, David, we are so excited to have you with us today. And, we're going to kick it off with our favorite first question. Tell us about yourself. Skip gave some of your background info, but kind of fill in the gaps on how you got started and how you ended up doing what you're doing today in the photography industry.
I'll tell you, one of the things Skip left out was that he is, in fact, one of the very, very first people I met at PPA Money. Skip, you probably don't remember this, but my first day at PPA was a board of directors meeting. It just was coincidentally when the board was coming into town, and you were on the board of directors at the time. And I got on the elevator, I pushed the button, and before the elevator door closed, a hand reached in, and a crowd of people, you talk about your worst nightmare, a crowd of people jumped onto the elevator. This was a Sunday, and so I thought, oh my goodness, this has got to be the PPA board of directors. And you were on that elevator, by the way. That was when I first met everybody all at the same time. So you were one of the very first ones. My first life was actually in TV news, as you know. I think I started out in the news business as a reporter and anchor, but marketing was always kind of my other love. I didn't like the direction that TV news was headed even back then, and made the jump after about a dozen years, into marketing, where I headed up national corporate marketing for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis. I worked as a VP of marketing for the St. Louis Cardinals, but worked with corporations and others, to build cause-related marketing programs, and then was looking to actually move back to Atlanta. I was from the Atlanta area. PPA was in Atlanta. I saw an opening for a director of marketing and communications, applied for that, and stayed there for just about a year and a half, I guess it was, Skip, something like that. And Andy Foster left about 6 months after I got there. They were looking for another CEO, and one thing led to another, and it just seemed to work out. I wasn't planning on staying all that time, but honestly, guys, I just, I fell in love with the photographic industry. I fell in love with what photographers do for our world. I think they're more important than even they realize they are. I fell in love with the idea that they're small businesses, they're entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs and small business is so critical to our world, to our economy. Just fell in love with all of it, to be honest. And it's just been a joyride. It's just been a thrill, for the last, Skip, it's been 23 years. I hate to tell you that, man. We're not as young as we used to be. Yeah, it's been 23 years.
Well, I mean, I said it before we got started too. I mean, time flies when you're having a good time, and it really is true. And even through the pandemic and some of the tough times over the last year, I mean, overall, as an industry, in the way we all try and support each other and watch each other's backs, and, I mean, you and I could sit here and come up with 50 people right now that we could, either one of us could call. And Shamira, too, even though you haven't been in the industry as long, could come up with a group of people that you could call right now and say, hey, I'm having a problem. I need help. And we've seen it with photographers that I remember Calvin Hayes' sister passing away, and I think Dennis Reggie shot the wedding that he was scheduled to do. And I can't remember who filled in for Joe Busink when he was in the hospital. I mean, there's so many areas of this industry that we all share love for the craft and we all share love for each other. And that sounds really sappy, but it's so true. And we see it happen all the time.
No, listen, I don't think it sounds sappy at all. And in fact, it is one of the things I noticed right off was the way people, because ultimately these are competitors, right? I mean, these are people competing with each other for the same business, even in their own communities. And they're helping each other out. They're sharing ideas. They're sharing thoughts. It's a remarkable industry on a lot of different levels. But no, I agree with you. I think it's one of the things that kept me here, to be honest. It's just such an amazing industry. And let's be honest. I mean, it's vital. It's critical to our world. Up until about 60 or 70 years ago, everything we knew about ourselves was written by hand. It was written down. It was, but in the last 160, roughly since the Civil War, or a little before, I guess, what we've known about ourselves, everything we think of when we think of our world histories or our, national histories or our family histories, everything we think of are the images that are created by people just like you, Shamira. And you are our societal memory. You are, what we think of when we think of our world today. It's what's created by professional photographers. And it's interesting that even when it comes down to our societal memory, to our histories, it's not even video. Isn't that interesting? We still fall back on still images, which I think that's really fascinating. When you consider that, we still look at those still images. We have the video of John saluting the casket, as he rolled by, as JFK rolled by. But it's the image, it's the still image that we have, that we all think of. It's an interesting dynamic. We are drawn to the still image, the eyes.
Well, I have repeatedly commented over the years, and it starts to sound like a magazine article reading itself when I say it, but with the exception of modern medicine, I don't believe there's any group or industry, a group of people or industry that have given the world more than photographers. And it's not just photographers, it's everybody under the imaging umbrella. So if you're sitting in a factory somewhere and you're making shutter buttons, you're still contributing to the tools of the craft. And I think what so many photographers are forgetting right now is the magic that they're able to provide to consumers. I mean, come on, you're taking an intangible memory and you're turning it into something that people can hold for a lifetime and pass on to other generations. And in fact, that's probably a perfect segue to talk about where you see some of the biggest challenges for photographers / artists / videographers. We can throw them in too. It's one big group. Where do you see the biggest challenges right now?
If I may just sort of applaud you guys and promote you just a little bit. I was listening to your podcast featuring Tim and Bev Walden, wonderful people, right? Good friends of ours.
Oh,
And
great people.
yeah, and I, it they noted that they had to sort of relearn how to be in business with a pandemic going on. They had to make themselves get up in the morning to continue to learn new skills. I mean, they had to learn how to be in business with a pandemic. And oddly enough, I agree with that, by the way. But oddly enough, I think it's important. I think it's critical actually for photographers to learn how to be in business post pandemic. I mean, honestly, they have to get back in the saddle. And lots had pretty good years last year. It was interesting. The ones who stayed with it, who really hustled and worked hard, they actually had, interestingly, some pretty good years. I've heard a lot of photographers say that it was one of the best years. I've heard some say it was the best year they ever had. And I thought, that's interesting. How could that be? But it was really because they made themselves available in ways that the consumer wanted to access them, right? Last year. And so and so there was business to be had, and they did well. I think, to me, the most critical issue facing photography today is, for everyone to sort of pick themselves back up, dust themselves off, get back in the saddle. I know that sounds cliche, almost silly, but it really is the truth. It's just, look, this is an industry of entrepreneurs, of mom and pop businesses, the smallest of small businesses. And it is imperative that everyone shake this off and get going again, because there is nothing that indicates the underpinnings of professional photography have come undone. Consumers are spending. We've conducted research using Nielsen. I mean, and consumers want to purchase printed photography, professional photography. There's nothing that's changed except maybe the mindset of photographers coming out of this. I don't know. What do you guys think? But to me, I think that's the issue, is that right now we need to get photographers back in the saddle, and get them refocused to going after business again.
I made a comment. Oh, sorry. I made a comment in a Zoom workshop I taught a few weeks ago, and this was before Mother's Day. And the comment I made was, think about the pandemic and what has grandma missed the most? She's missed her family.
Yeah.
And in fact, I shared a picture of a couple of images of Kay Estridge visiting her folks who are in a senior living development, and she couldn't touch them. I mean, she's got her hand on the glass and her dad is on the other side. And it was just such a gut-wrenching moment. Well, in that same vein, what grandma has missed the most, photographers have the ability to provide, and that's that it's time to do an updated family portrait. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better segue to a marketing plan, right, than the last year and a half that people have had to spend socially distanced and watching, health issues.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, by the way. I think you have to follow consumer trends and where the consumer mindset is, because photography, like every other business, please forgive me for saying this, is not about the product, it's about the consumer, right? It's always about the customer, it's about the consumer and where their mindset is and what their expectations are. And right now, the consumer mindset, I think we cherish family moments and family even more than we ever have before, because we were so separated from each other. And
I so agree.
Humans are social beings, right? And we need that interaction with each other and with our families. I mean, I know that Sandy and I did. I mean, we weren't all that far away from our kids. We have 2 very young grandchildren now, and we were thirsty for every possible image that we could get, right? And we are already planning for some new family photographs, because things have changed a lot over the last year. Children have changed a lot. You know what I mean? They've grown up a little bit, and everybody right now needs a new family photograph, a new family portrait. And so I think that works to photographers' advantage, again, if they get back in the saddle and start rebuilding those relationships.
You know, David, I love how you beat me to the punch, because I wanted to touch on the importance of having the right mindset for our business. And you really hit the nail on the head. You know, looking at consumer trends and how much people value photos now more than ever, after a year of, like you mentioned, some family members not even being able to be in contact with each other. And now we can. It's more important than ever, the weight and gravity that family images especially carry. And so I'm curious, though, especially with your marketing background, what are some proactive actions that photographers can take right now, especially those who maybe have been stuck in their own heads or have been stuck in a negative mindset? What are some proactive actions that they can take for their business right now to kind of pick things up again?
Yeah, I'll tell you, Shamir, I think that's actually exactly the right question because we are stuck in a negative mindset.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just a rough year for COVID, right? It was we had a lot of social disruption and a really ugly political season, and people were just divided. And I don't mean to drag us into that territory out into the weeds anywhere,
That's true, though.
But yeah, I mean we were just so angry and so divided, and I think that was the start of this episode, and really of all your episodes recently, right? Where everyone's excited about coming out of COVID, and we're starting to see people again, and we're starting to travel a little bit again, and it just the sun seems a little warmer and brighter, and everything just seems a little bit better. And I think that there is a negativity there, by the way, that probably always has existed, or at least for the last, I don't know, 10 or 12 years, I would say, at least since 2008 or 9, at least. The negativity there that we've been trying to shake off as an industry, because how many times have you guys heard people say, oh, it's people just don't value photography the way they used to? That's not true. and we know that's not true because we have the research to prove, the numbers to prove that is not true. But people just aren't spending money on photography. What are we talking about? I mean, they're spending money at a higher clip than any time in the history of the world. There's never been a society that spends more money, more on discretionary items like photography than Americans do in 2021. It's never existed. It's never, there's never been a group that is more ready to spend. And so it is really that, in my opinion, it's the negativity that photographers have deep inside. Now, all of us are born with a negativity bias. There's a really interesting science that's growing up around this idea, and it is science. It's not scientific theory. It's actually, they can see what's going on in the brain, right? And all of us are born with a negativity bias, but successful people are good at overcoming that negativity bias, as seeing failure not as failure, but just as the path to success, right? And so I think photographers have got to, one, they've got to get over that negativity bias. They've got to change the mindset. There are some things that they can do to sort of put that negativity behind them, and to start being positive, start understanding that the market is ripe and it is ready to go, and the ones who are getting back in there are doing really, really well. And there's no reason why any photographer should think that they just can't, they just can't survive in today's world because of the economy. I think that's just not true. And then the other thing is, and I think you guys probably know I'm about to say this, is go out and rebuild those relationships. Call people, make contact with them, start talking to them. I mean, it's about relationships. Reach out to them, go visit schools, go visit, your clients, just build those relationships back. This is completely, I think, a relationship business. I mean, yeah, we can market ourselves. We can do some advertising. None of that will replace the relationships that we need to, that need to be built back after COVID. And so I think, to me, those are the two things. We need to eliminate that negativity that's inside of us. That's easier said than done, but there are actionable things that we can do to eliminate negativity. And then the other is we have to build the relationships back. I mean, it is relationship building business, and the ones who do it are going to be successful. There is nothing that indicates that photography has seen its best days. There's nothing that indicates that, actually. It's just something that it's an excuse for curling up in the fetal position and not doing what we're supposed to do as entrepreneurs, right? I mean, and I think I don't know. Tell me what you guys think on this, because in some ways, I think post-COVID, post-pandemic entrepreneurism is a more difficult thing because we can use COVID, we can use the pandemic as a crutch, as an excuse to not do what we're supposed to be doing as entrepreneurs. That's just a theory. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but to me, it's a crutch. It's just a reason to not go out there and work hard and succeed.
I've run into both kinds of people, actually. I've run into people who not just fellow photographers, but other industries as well, where the pandemic makes it very easy for them to say that their business is struggling or times are tough. And it's this very, very strong negative attitude where they kind of don't try because of the pandemic. It's an excuse not to try.
Yeah.
But then the flip side of that coin, just yesterday I ran into a photographer friend who mentioned that business was booming. And she specializes in senior high school photography portraits. And she has a full schedule. And granted, last year was slow for her because, high school seniors weren't getting graduation ceremonies or photos. Now there's like this backlog almost. And she's busier than ever and maximizing on that opportunity. And it was so refreshing to see her positive attitude and excitement as well as she planned a future for her clients. And she's making herself so available to these people that she's just flooded with business. It was very cool.
It's interesting because within our industry, there is a history of falling back on or a history of a group of people that fall back on that negativity. And if I really go back, and I remember using this in a workshop once, that when color photography came out, the black and white artists said, well, that's it. The industry is shot. And then when digital came along, their kids are now exposed to it, and they're saying, whoa, the industry is falling apart because we've gone from black and white to color and now to digital. When autofocus came out, I remember Calumet throwing Nikon out and actually having the Nikon logo with a bar across it.
Wow.
Because Nikon had announced they were not going to make any more manual focus lenses. It was all going to be autofocus. And then if you look just in the last few years, everybody has been shooting at the weekend warrior, at the part-time photographers. And yet for the last 25 years, the industry has always been made up of a huge group of part-time photographers, typically teachers, for example, in the wedding industry, because they're off in the summer, and summers used to be wedding season, as opposed to now where people tend to get married all year long. And that was the issue. And now you have the pandemic. And this is what I said to both of you when we were talking before, but that we started was, we've got some people out there that thought hunkering down was more than just their health. Well, hunkering down was about your health and protecting yourself and your family, but not your business. So staying in contact, and this kind of leads me into another direction I wanted you to go in, I hope, David, is the leadership opportunities that are out there for people to step up and do something different. And I watched a 1-minute teaser video that's up on the PPA site now about one of your programs about living in a COVID world and getting back on that horse you talked about. David, where do you see some of those leadership opportunities that are, to you and I, it's low-hanging fruit for photographers to start doing things differently again?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. I'm not a sprinter. I'm not a track guy. I hate running, to be honest. I have to make myself run. But and I'm not a track guy. But that everybody in track who's, they're always taught don't look side to side, when you're trying to sprint through the finish line, right? Because that's when people pass you. Don't stop and look. Just keep charging forward. And I think those people that are saying right now that they just had the best year they've ever had, and honestly, I've heard a lot say it. I mean, I've heard quite a few people say this was the best year I've ever had. I think it's because the others are looking side to side. They've stopped. They've used the excuse of the pandemic. And while they were using that excuse to be in a fetal position, to curl up in the fetal position, others are out there really hustling and charging even harder. The Tim and Bev Waldens and others, they're charging harder than they ever did before. They're working on relationships harder than they ever did before. And they're being rewarded because other photographers are, curled up in the fetal position and saying, oh, woe is me. And so I think that the market is there. I think consumers want photographers and every other business, by the way, to reach out to them. Their pot of money, discretionary spending, right? Their pot of discretionary funds is bigger than it has ever been, even in light of the pandemic. And that's what people don't understand, is that they are still spending money. I mean, look what's going on in the travel industry right now, right? I mean, people aren't pulling back. They're traveling everywhere, trying to get back at it as hard as they can. So the ones that I think offer them now the opportunity, for things like family portraits or school portraiture, or executive portraits, or I think the ones that are hustling a little bit harder than they ever did before and learning how to reach out to post-pandemic customers are the ones that are going to be rewarded with their business. And that's the way every business down cycle goes, right? Historically, it's you go into a recession and there are some that curl up and there are some that go after it harder. And when you come out of that recession, the companies that worked harder and kept at it are the ones that have picked up market share, and the others go out of business. And so some companies get larger and some cease to exist. And I think in terms of photography, that is certainly the case. I hope I'm answering your question, Skip, but I think I just think there are opportunities I just think there are a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs, for photographers to really get after it now and reach out to everybody they can, harder than they have ever before, because I think the market is ripe and we have a bunch of consumers who want photography. They value family more now than they have ever before.
There's an expression that Scott Bourne was one of the first people I heard talk about it, and it was own your zip code. And just to get really specific, nuts and bolts here, now is the time for every photographer out there to start knocking on doors, not going door to door necessarily in your neighborhood, but to every business there. And I've had wedding photographers say, well, why would I visit a realtor? I'm a wedding photographer. Well, it's really simple. You knock on the door, you introduce yourself, you leave a business card, and you say, look, my specialty is wedding photography, but I've got a great background in imaging overall, and if I can help you with anything you need in photography, give me a shout. I won't always have the answers, but I've got this great network of other photographers. Just something, just to introduce yourself. And what people seem to forget is even wedding photographers, realtors have families who get married and who eventually need a wedding photographer. But that doesn't mean along the way that somebody isn't going to need a headshot for a brochure or need some help with their website. I mean, it really is about knocking on doors right now. And coming out of the pandemic, I mean, I get a knock on my door here, even the UPS guy I talk to. It's so great to have contact with people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think everybody feels that. I think everybody feels that way right now. We want the interactions. We want that. And everybody we've ever worked with, everyone who's ever purchased anything from us and others, out there, like the ones you're talking about, we need to be reaching out to all of them, reintroducing ourselves, letting them know, hey, we're still here. Look, how many times, Shamir and Skip, how many times have you heard over the years people say, It's photography is just not what it used to be. It's just
Yeah.
not. Well, of course
Yes.
it's not. What business is? I mean, tell me, what business is what it used to be? It's not supposed to be what it used to be. Everything's changing. The world's changing. Consumers are changing. None of us are the same consumer that we were, you know, 5 years ago, much less 10 years ago, or even 3 years ago, right? And so it's, we're all changing. And because consumers are changing, the world's changing. And so, yes, photography is not what it used to be. It's not supposed to be what it used to be.
Well,
It's our job to reach out to consumers today and let them know that we're here to meet the needs that they have. Sorry.
here's what all those people that say that forget is that because of social media today, the photographer, in fact, every small business owner has the reach that going back 10 years ago, a small newspaper had. I mean, it's phenomenal, your ability to reach people and touch people and to reach their hearts with great images.
There will be, statistically, we know this for a fact, there will be between 2.3 and 2.5 million weddings in the U.S. this year.
Wow.
There are, on the books, there are a total of 175,000 professional photographers. That's of all type. Now, I realize I'm just talking about weddings, but anyone who says that there's not enough work, and then think of all the sports leagues, all the school portraits, and then all the commercial, photography that's out there, all of the executive photos, think of all of the different genres of professional photography. There's 175,000 photographers. There's 2.3 million weddings. And that's just looking at weddings. There is enough work for everyone. There just is.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of going out and getting it and getting rid of that negative. It's the negativity bias that's inside of us that tells us, Skip, using your example, no, don't go knocking on those doors. Don't go down to that real estate conference. Don't do that. I'm not going to get anything from that anyway. It's easier for me to stay here and retouch, play with some images on my computer. The stuff I love to do. I'm going to stay home and do that instead of going out and building relationships. It's that negativity bias that tells us not to do that. That's the danger. That's the damage that's done by negativity in our lives. It stops us from doing things that we should be doing.
Well, you're right. There's so much opportunity out there, and this is exciting stuff. This is really exciting. And let's talk about something else that's exciting as well. I'm curious to hear about what's coming up for the Imaging USA show, the conference, in the future. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, let me just say, first of all, Shamir, that was smooth as silk, by the way. that was really nicely done.
Yeah.
What can I
was
say?
Yeah.
That was
We
nicely
promised
done.
we wouldn't turn this into an infomercial, but to be honest with you, everything that you and I and Shamira are talking about all comes to a head with education and business and marketing, and
Yeah.
there you
Yeah.
are with the keys to the castle.
Well, and listen, I'll even expand it. It's not just Imaging USA. I mean, I think there's a lot that, and I will answer your question, but I think it's all kinds of education, don't you? I mean, I just think now is the time, and frankly, all last year was the time. We were encouraging people, look, brush up on your skills, add new abilities, to get all the education during this COVID year that you can, so that when it comes time to hit the ground running, you can do just that. You can hit the ground running, right? Imaging's an interesting thing. We are a not-for-profit, and this isn't an infomercial. This simply because everybody who comes to Imaging USA this year is going to cost us being PPA in this case, is going to cost us money. We have lowered the price to $59. $59, by the way, pays for one of the parties. I mean, it doesn't pay for the other party. It doesn't pay for keynotes, receptions. It doesn't pay for speakers, platform speakers. It doesn't pay for any of that stuff. All the costs associated, signage and lights and AV and travel for people that have to work the event. And it doesn't pay for all of that. So we are going to be losing about $100 for every person who walks in the door. But we set the price at $59 because quite honestly, that's who we are. And at some point, if you are the industry, the not-for-profit in the industry and the watchdog and the protector and all of those things, you kind of have to put up or shut up, right? I mean, this is where you prove whether or not we are what we say we are. And so we've dropped the price to $59, which doesn't even come close to paying our bills. And everyone who walks in will cost us money, but we also feel like that's what we need to do to help jumpstart the industry. I agree with you, by the way, Skip. I think it's going to be a huge show. I think people are going to be so excited about finally getting back together come January. It's in a good location. It's in, Washington, D.C. It's in National Harbor, which is an Amtrak show, and most of our shows are not. You can't just get there from the Eastern Seaboard by train, It's easy to fly into, from wherever you go to. It's driving distance from a giant part of the country. So it's, we break our education when you get there. We break the education down into photographic technique, business, and then the gap, which is basically the entrepreneurial skills that we were talking about, planning, making, how to build relationships, eliminating negativity bias. I mean, all that's inside of us. It's those things. So our information is broken down into three different tracks. By the way, we're also, I know that, and this sounds a little crazy, but we're also actually subsidizing everyone's hotel stay if they're staying at the Gaylord National Harbor, which is, we've negotiated a rate of $199, which is amazing for the Gaylord National Harbor, but we're subsidizing those hotel rates by $40 a night. So, I mean, they're going to send us a bill for everybody who stays there during the conference, and so we're actually paying the Gaylord National Harbor $40 a night for everybody who stays in the hotel. And again, people say, what in the world are you doing? I mean, is it going to wreck the association? It's not. And this is a unique circumstance. And sometimes you just have to decide, is this who we say we are, And so we're excited about it. And we think it's an important show for helping to get the industry back at it. There are other great shows out there, and we're one of those, but that's what we're doing, to answer your question.
Well, we'll be there. So listen, we ran out of time a while ago, and Shamir and I, for everybody listening, we text back and forth as we're doing these over who's going to take the next question and where do you want to go on this. But I want to close us out with asking you our favorite last question, which is, what advice would you give a photographer just starting out today? Now, it's really a combination of everything we just talked about. But if you had a photographer sitting there right now in your office saying, where do I start? What would you tell them?
Well, probably no surprise to you guys. I would say, listen, take your business seriously. I mean, I know you're going to take photography seriously because you love photography. That's why you're getting into it. But take the business aspect, a part of it, seriously. I mean, understand your market, understand your local market, and understand the market generally speaking. I mean, know the numbers, understand, and that's all readily available. It's there everywhere, that information. Understand negativity bias inside of you, understand relationship building. I mean, take that part of your business seriously, because ultimately consumers don't care about us, right? We're all consumers also, but consumers have a funny way of caring about themselves. They worry about their own, they have the carpool they have to drive, or piano lessons, or hoping to take a family vacation, or their little boy who just fell out of a tree and has to go to the doctor. Consumers care about themselves, and so we have to understand that part of our business. We have to understand our market so that we can relate to the consumer that we hope will buy our photography. So it can't just be about camera and equipment and gear. I mean, that's important. It has to also be about the business aspect, understanding your numbers, and the entrepreneurial aspect of all of it. That would be what I would say. I would say take your business seriously.
I can't think of a better answer to wrap up this interview. My goodness. I mean, this has just been a dose of excitement and inspiration talking with you, David. And I do want to make sure and ask, where can folks find you online?
Well, in different places, but mostly you'll find me through our Facebook page, the PPA Facebook page. That's where we do our stuff. And PPA.com, there's a lot about us and a lot of our latest releases and the things we're working on in Washington, D.C. or in education, PPA EDU. So it's probably an odd answer for your question, but really you find me through all of the PPA stuff.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, my personal social media accounts are not all that interesting because I don't think people really care what I have to say about politics and society and that kind of thing. I think they'd rather me just keep my mouth shut and work through the PPA stuff.
Well, we will make sure to include links to PPA so that people can, if they live under a rock somewhere and don't know how to get, to the website, we'll make sure to include those links for sure.
Thank you.
And Skip, where can folks find you online?
It's always the same thing. Everything I write is at skipcohenuniversity.com. I'm Skip Cohen on Facebook. I'm Skip Cohen on Twitter. And we want to hear back from you guys. So if there's feedback, good or bad, and if there are ideas you have or topics you wish we'd discuss or guests you wish we'd have on Mind Your Own Business, my email is skip@mei500.com, skip@mei500.com. And Shamira, as I always ask, where do they go to find you?
Yes, folks can send me an email at shamira@photofocus.com. That is my first name, Shamira, CHAMIRA @photofocus.com. We love getting questions, ideas, feedback, because it does really shape how we move forward with the show and the amazing guests that we chat with. And speaking of amazing, David, this was awesome. This was amazing.
Just
Thank
great
you.
stuff today, David.
Well, it's my pleasure, guys. It's always wonderful to chat with you. Skip and I go way back, and this has been a good time for me. Thank you.
Awesome. And we want to thank our listeners for joining us as well. Please tell your friends about this podcast, especially if they have the burning desire to improve their photography business post-pandemic. We look forward to having you with us next time on the Mind Your Own Business podcast, brought to you by Photofocus and Skip Cohen University.